You're going to hear about 8 psychological traits today, and I want to be honest with you from the start. Some of these traits are going to make you uncomfortable, not because the content is graphic, but because some of you are going to recognize someone you love in these descriptions. Someone whose refusal to apologize has cost you sleep, cost you dignity, and maybe cost you the relationship itself. The person who never apologizes is one of the most reliably frustrating people to be in a relationship with, romantic, familial, professional, or otherwise. Their refusal to acknowledge harm they've caused is not a minor personality quirk. It is a window into a specific psychological architecture that, once understood, more explains not just the apology refusal, but many other patterns you've probably noticed in this person and never been able to fully explain. Today, we're going in. Research from the University of Texas at Austin, the University of Pennsylvania, and Florida State University has produced a detailed psychological profile of people who cannot or will not apologize. And what these researchers have found is both more complex and, in some ways, more disturbing than simple arrogance. Let's examine it properly. Trait 1 is the foundational trait that makes all the others possible: identity, fusion with behavior. Most psychologically healthy people operate with a clear internal separation between who they are and what they have done. This separation is what allows accountability. No, I did something wrong does not threaten your core identity when your identity and your actions exist as separate domains. You made a mistake. The mistake is not you. For people who never apologize, this separation is weak or absent. Their identity and their behavior are fused, so that an admission of behavioral wrongdoing is experienced as an admission of fundamental self-deficiency. I did something wrong becomes, in their internal processing, I am wrong, I am bad, I am defective. The emotional weight of this translation is enormous. Dr. Aaron Beck, founder of cognitive behavioral therapy and a researcher at the University of Pennsylvania, whose work on cognitive distortions has influenced virtually every therapeutic modality in current practice, describes this as an all-or-nothing cognitive schema. The belief that any imperfection or failure constitutes total failure. Any error constitutes fundamental unworthiness. People with strong all-or-nothing schemas cannot safely acknowledge mistakes because their cognitive processing converts the acknowledgement into a total identity verdict. This is why you will frequently observe that the person who never apologizes is also someone who reacts to mild criticism with disproportionate defensiveness, who rarely, if ever, admits uncertainty or ignorance, and who tends to double down rather than reconsider when presented with evidence that they were wrong. The wall is not self-confidence, it is self-protection. The more rigid the defense, the more fragile what is being defended. Dr. Brené Brown, whose research program at the University of Texas at Austin has focused on shame and vulnerability for over 2 decades, draws the precise distinction that makes this clear. Guilt, she notes in her peer-reviewed research, is the feeling generated by the statement, I did something bad. It is an evaluation of the behavior. Shame is the feeling generated by I am bad. It is an evaluation of self. Her research demonstrates that guilt, despite its discomfort, is associated with empathy, accountability, and pro-social behavior. Shame is associated with aggression, defense, and disengagement. The person who refuses to apologize is not someone free of guilt and shame. They are someone who experiences the approach of guilt as a trigger for catastrophic shame, and whose entire behavioral system is organized around preventing that experience. Yet trait 2 is the absence of what psychologists call empathic resonance. And this is where the behavior becomes genuinely damaging. A sincere apology requires a specific emotional capacity, the ability to step inside another person's experience, feel the weight of their pain as it is for them, and allow that felt understanding to motivate repair behavior. This is not just empathy in the general sense of understanding how someone feels, it is resonance. The ability to allow someone else's emotional reality to land in your own body and produce a genuine response. Research by Dr. Roy Baumeister at Florida State University on the asymmetry between transgressors and victims, published across multiple studies in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, documented a consistent and dramatic difference in how people who have hurt others experience the harm compared to how the harmed person experiences it. Transgressors consistently underestimate the severity, duration, and emotional impact of harm they have caused. They move on faster, feel less responsibility, and frequently believe the affected party's continued distress is an overreaction. This asymmetry is not unique to people who never apologize. It is a general human bias. But in the person who chronically refuses to apologize, this bias has hardened into a fixed perceptual frame. Your pain is excessive, your feelings are not proportionate, and therefore no apology is proportionate to what you are presenting as harm. The result is a relationship dynamic that many of you have lived from the inside. You experience something as genuinely harmful. You communicate that clearly, and the other person's response makes you doubt your own perception. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe it wasn't that big a deal. Maybe my feelings are the problem, not their behavior. This is not an accident. The person who never apologizes is, consciously or otherwise, consistently offering a narrative in which your feelings are the issue. Because if your feelings are the issue, no behavioral change is required from them. Trait 3 brings us into the territory of early learned behavior. And this is the trait that most requires compassion alongside clarity. Many people who cannot apologize grew up in environments where apology was dangerous. This can take several forms, all of which produce the same outcome through different mechanisms. In environments where a parent or authority figure responded to a child's admission of fault with disproportionate punishment, humiliation, or prolonged withdrawal of love, the child learned a survival lesson. Admitting you were wrong makes things worse. The apology does not end the consequence, it triggers it. The safe response is denial, minimization, and deflection. The child who learned this and survived childhood with this strategy became an adult running the same program, in contexts where it is no longer necessary or appropriate, but where the nervous system continues to generate the same dictates. Never admit fault, never show vulnerability. Vulnerability got you hurt before. In environments where a narcissistic parent modeled the behavior, where the adults in the child's world never apologized, never admitted error, never demonstrated accountability, the child had no template for what healthy accountability looks like. They may not consciously believe that apologies are dangerous. They simply have no behavioral model for them. It is a skill that was never demonstrated, never taught, and therefore never learned. Research from the Developmental Psychology Department at the University of Massachusetts Amherst on parental influence on moral reasoning development demonstrates that children's capacity for moral accountability is substantially predicted by the accountability behaviors they observed in their caregivers. Children who grew up in homes where mistakes were acknowledged, apologized for, and repaired without shame have significantly higher rates of spontaneous accountability behavior as adults. The correlation is strong enough that researchers use it as a predictor variable. Understanding the developmental origin of the pattern does not mean accepting its ongoing impact on you, but it does mean that the behavior is in part a survival adaptation that predates the current relationship and is not fundamentally about you. Trait 4 is power orientation, and this is the trait that appears most deliberately harmful, even when it is not consciously chosen. In dominance hierarchies, which operate in human social dynamics as surely as they do in any other primate social structure, the person who apologizes first occupies a submissive position. The apology signals that the relationship is more important to them than being right, that they accept vulnerability as a cost of repair, and that they are willing to reduce their status in service of the connection. In a healthy relationship, both parties can and do accept this cost because the relationship itself is valued above the status dynamics. For individuals with a high dominance orientation, a personality dimension studied extensively by social psychologists, including Dr. Felicia Prado at the University of Connecticut, the status cost of apology is experienced as genuinely threatening. The feeling is not, I don't want to admit I was wrong. The feeling is more visceral. Apology equals submission. Submission equals vulnerability. And vulnerability is something that has been learned at a deep level to be dangerous. This pattern is especially common in individuals with narcissistic personality traits, where maintaining an image of superiority and infallibility is central to the psychological structure. But it also appears in individuals who grew up in environments where power and dominance were the primary organizing principles of relationships. and who internalize that framework as the natural order of all relationships. In practice, this means that every conflict with this person is a zero-sum power negotiation in which apology represents a loss they are not willing to accept. They may offer behaviors that function like apologies, gifts, increased affection, behavioral changes, as long as these substitutes don't require the explicit acknowledgement of fault. Because explicit acknowledgement is the part that feels like submission. The behavior can change, the admission cannot. Traits 5 through 8. We examine together because each represents a specific cognitive or emotional mechanism that supports the non-apology pattern. Trait 5 is narrative reframing, the capacity to retroactively reconstruct the meaning of events so that no wrongdoing occurred. This is not lying in the conventional sense. It is a genuine cognitive process by which the person reorganizes their perception of what happened to produce a version in which their behavior was justified, misunderstood, or provoked. I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. You're too sensitive. You misunderstood what I meant. I said that because you pushed me to it. Each of these statements, offered sincerely, eliminates the premise of the apology. If nothing wrong happened, no apology is warranted. Trait 6 is future orientation as apology substitute. Rather than acknowledging past harm, the person pivots immediately to the future, what they will do differently, how things will be better, the plan going forward. This can sound like accountability and functions to redirect both parties away from the emotional work of acknowledgement, but it systematically skips the repair that acknowledgement provides. The validation of the harmed person's experience, the shared understanding that something real happened, the relational renegotiation that genuine accountability makes possible. The future-oriented pivot offers improvement without repair, and repair is what the injured party actually needs. Trait 7 is projection, in attributing to others the traits or behaviors that belong to the self. The person who never apologizes is often the first to accuse others of the exact behaviors they themselves exhibit. This is a classical defense mechanism described in psychoanalytic theory and documented extensively in modern cognitive behavioral research at the Beck Institute. It functions to externalize shame, to locate in someone else the deficiency that threatens to be found in the self if accountability is accepted. Trait 8 is selective memory restructuring. Research on motivated cognition, the tendency of memory to be selectively reorganized in service of self-preservation, documents that people who strongly resist accountability tend over time to genuinely misremember events in ways that reduce their culpability. This is not deliberate fabrication. It is the memory system editing its records in service of the psychological need to avoid the shame that accurate memory would produce. The person genuinely does not remember it the way you do. This makes the conversation about what happened almost impossible, because you are, in a very real sense, working from different recordings. The 8 traits we've examined today, identity fusion, empathic deficit, learned defensive behavior, dominance orientation, narrative reframing, future pivoting, projection, and motivated memory, are not a portrait of a monster. They are a portrait of a person who is psychologically organized around the avoidance of shame in a way that makes genuine accountability structurally impossible. Understanding this does not mean accepting the ongoing damage of the behavior. It means having clarity about what you are working with and what you are not. You are not working with someone who simply doesn't care enough to apologize. You are working with someone whose entire psychological system is designed at levels below conscious choice to prevent the experience of accountability-triggered shame. You cannot argue them into a genuine apology. You cannot explain yourself clearly enough to generate one. You cannot love someone past a defense that is not fundamentally about you. What you can do is decide with full information what you need from a relationship, and whether this one is capable of providing it. That is a painful decision, but it is an informed one. And informed decisions, however difficult, honor your reality in a way that endless cycles of hope and disappointment cannot. Is there someone in your life who never apologizes? Comment below and tell us how you've navigated it.